Hi, welcome to Pay It Forward. Yes, that is a sleepy sheep on my shoulder. I finally got around to making a sheep pattern for you all. I've had so many requests, so I thought I'd make it up in our patchwork series. So many of you have enjoyed that one. So very, very simple to make and great for a child's bed. All you need to do is find that pattern. It's in the description box below. You simply need to click on that link and you'll be able to find your free pattern templates. Now when you go to print them out, make sure that you set your printer to be printing at actual size in the settings, and that way all of those pattern pieces will be absolutely spot on for you. So who's ready to add to their collection and make my little sleepy sheep? So let's start with our materials and requirements. We're going to start with our head pieces on this one, and we have our two head pieces, front and back, and I have those interfaced with a fusible woven cotton interfacing. You do need to interface this project, and you can see there I'm going for a little black face sheep. So this project can be made up as a neutral coloured sheep, or of course sheep don't have to be natural colours. You could make pink sheep and all sorts, but I'll give you the layout for the type of colour depth you need, and then you can apply that to any range of colour. So then we're going to have our pieces that we add to the front, and we have the inner ears, and I've got those cut from fabric. These have fusible webbing applied. And then we have our front muzzle section. We have our first piece, which even though I'm going for a black face sheep, that grey is going to lift that whole front muzzle area. So, and it's still keeping within those tones, so it's still believable. So our next piece is the actual nose underneath, and that one is cut. I cut that one from black. Both these have fusible webbing applied. And then there's an over piece for the nose that gives us that lovely little nostril effect, that real sheep sort of a look there. And you can see I've gone for a deeper grey there. So I'm keeping all the tones the same, and you could do the same with any colours that you're going for. Just keep that balance of colour happening through and you'll be right. We're then going to be adding eyes, and I'm keeping, with these projects, I always keep them very, very animated. So I've got my lovely white eye pieces there, and I'm going to be adding buttons for eyes. You could use safety eyes. I like buttons with this project. What I'm going to be doing there, I want a bit of colour with this one because my black and white toned sheep is quite colourless. So by adding that pop of green for the eyes, that's going to be lovely. And I'm going to centre it with a black button. So remember, you can always double up on your buttons, and they will be sitting there. Little quizzical look there. And then on this one I'm doing, because we're going for a little sleepy look, we have some eyelids there that will be stitched over, give a lovely effect over those eyes. So make sure whatever you choose for the buttons that they're big enough to still be seen when we cover some of that over. And these little eyelids I've cut from double felt, and you'll notice that I've got two different colours there. I've got the lighter grey that I've used here and the darker grey because it's underneath, and it'll give a bit of shadowing, which is what I'm after. We're going to be stitching the mouth, centre mouth in with black thread, so we don't need anything for that. So that's our face, although we will be adding, well, I'm going to be adding, to create the look of sort of a top knot, a woolly top knot, I'm going to be adding some little yo-yos, so little fabric yo-yos, which are very simple to make. I've cut out some circles. I've given you two templates there. You might want to make these just as colourful flowers. Your sheep, you know, could look equally as nice with a little bouquet of flowers there, but I'll show you how to do that. They are just cut from fabric, so no treatment on those at all. So that's our face. Let's move on to, we've got our body. Now the body with this one, it's actually, if you've made my little pig, here is a little pig here with the thicker set body we're going for. This is the way we're doing the body. Now the legs are different and everything else is different, but the body is the same. So we start off with our base body piece, which is cut from fabric, and it's got that fusible woven interfacing again. You'll find your pattern template is like this, and you draw it up, flip it over and draw the other side. So you've got one full pattern piece, and I've got just that creamy colour for the underbelly. And then what we're going to be doing for the front, for the top section where we're going to do our quilting, we need to cut this section here. It is also interfaced, and I'm just gone for a cream fabric, and the measurements for that one are 25 centimetres by 31 centimetres. We needed exactly that size because of the way we're going to lay out our strips, and then we're going to cut our top piece from our base template. So once you've got that piece, you need to cut yourself 9 strips, and I've got the measurements there, 25 centimetres by 4 centimetres, these strips. I've got it all written down on your pattern templates there, and just a variety of strips, prints, something that works for your project. You can see that I'm going for the greys, the neutrals, the creams and the whites, so that it's not quite just black and white. You'd be surprised how much colour you can add to this body if you're doing a little black face sheep and it still look like the black and the white, because we're keeping our face very, very black and also our legs. So you need 9 of those strips, and they have nothing added to them. They're just fabric on its own. So that's your body section, and then we move on to our arms and legs. And we've got, of course, our 2 front legs. These are different again. They're similar to the pig, but they have a more splayed little hoof and slightly longer. So those are our back legs and our front legs. Of course, you need 2 pairs of those, and they are also interfaced. We also need a little tail. So that's going to be added as we do our quilt as you go, and just something that works for your colours for your project. We also do need 1 circle piece you've got there in your templates with fusible webbing applied. That's for the back of the head, gives us a reinforcement. I'm going to be opening the back of that head and stuffing through there. Makes it much easier and saves on a ladder stitch. You're also going to need a button, a nice large button for joining that head right through to the base of the body. I've got a nice one there. I've got an assortment of extra buttons there for my little yo-yos for the top of my head. So whatever you have will be great. You will need your extra strong threads in your suitable colours, and also some pearl thread or some embroidery thread for doing a bit of detailing around that face. I'm going to do as much as I can on the machine of our sewing applique on. You will also need polyester filling to fill. I'm going to be adding some just some dry rice for some weight. If you don't want to go with the rice, you can add some fine aquarium gravel will work, or perhaps you have the proper toy fill pellets, plastic pellets, they'll work as well, or you can just fully fill it with polyester filling. I just think that bit of weight makes it a little bit squishy, and they tend to settle better on the bed. This one's being made as a bed sitter. So also you'll need a large doll needle for adding that head, and ideally if you have them, grab your forceps. That's going to help you with turning through those arms and legs. So to start with, what we're going to do is we're just going to take our head pieces, and the first thing we're going to do is press on that little back head circle. So whichever one is your back, we want to put that right in the center. So make sure it is central. I'm going to press that one on into place, and then I'm going to take that to the machine, and I'm going to sew a very close zigzag all around that outside edge. After that, we will mark in a line there to snip so that we can turn it through, but we need that one on there first. So get that one pressed into place, make your stitching line, and we'll come back and show you the next step. Once you have that center disc pressed and stitched into place there, you can see I've just drawn a line straight across there with my marker, just a little way from the edge, probably about 1/2 centimetre. And I've also stitched the edge of that little opening too, just like you would a button, so that it doesn't continue any further. And I've just made a cut there. So that's our opening, and we will turn our head through that opening. So our next step, we can put that one aside, is to go ahead with the first of our pieces on the front of our face. So the first one to go on is that base muzzle piece, and you can see that one is set 1.5 centimetres from the very edge of that base. Make sure it's all lined up and centered. Get that one pressed into place, and also those inner ear pieces. Now you see this line here. If you were to follow the curve of that head, you can see exactly where they will sit. We're actually going to be stitching that line as well when we put the head together. So get those pressed into place, and I'm now going to go to my machine and sew a zigzag, a close zigzag stitch, more like a satin stitch, around the edges of each of those pieces. The next pieces that we add after we've got these pieces stitched on is the center dark, your dark nose piece goes on first, and then this little section goes on straight over the top, and you can see it will just overlap slightly, and that gives us our little nostril area. Now of course all of these pieces can be sewn on by hand. You can do those with a blanket applique stitch if you like. I'm trying to keep everything, I like to do a lot of these on the machine. I like the neat finish. And so I will continue. Now I'm going to do a couple of different things here. I'm going to sew that same zigzag across the top of that nose section, just to keep that all nice and neat and flat, and it'll sort of tuck it under nicely. And then I'm just going to sew with a straight stitch on the machine around that nostril section there and around here, and just in black, just to settle that piece there. And I will probably leave that lower edge because we're going to be sewing the little straight mouth line down through here, which will anchor that piece down. So, but you can have a bit of a play with that. You can do as much or as little stitching on that as you like, but I do like to anchor those key pieces. So I'm going to get that done and show you how that looks. So that has my nose section all stitched into place there. Now my next step is I have taken my ruler, and straight through the center there, I've just drawn a line that extends about 1 centimetre into that nose section and about 1.5 centimetres from the base there. Just a straight line with my marker, and then you can use anything you like to make a little curve for a little smile. That's very much a little sheep shape, that little shape, long top lip, and that tiny little smile there. But you could do a traditional little V shape, inverted V if you want to. That's the shape I'm going for. So now I'm going to take it back to the machine and stitch over those lines 2 or 3 times till I've got a nice clear mouth and lip line in. So there you can see that little mouth line all stitched in there. So that's our whole nose and mouth section. Now I've gone ahead and added those eye circles. The best position for those is 1.5 centimetres from the highest point of your muzzle piece there. And I've got mine, it's just over 1 centimetre, so about 1.25 centimetres apart. Have a good look at that. Now remember that we're going for an animated look, because if we were making this realistic, those eyes would be over here, but it looks odd. It would be really odd because this is it's a cartoony kind of look we're going for. So right there is the best spot, and just make sure that it's all lined up. Measure from each side, and also run your ruler down the center there of that nose section. You'll be able to see that you've got them nicely centered, pressed into place with a hot iron and protective cloth. And again, I'm just going to sew a straight machine stitch around very, very close to that edge, so everything's kept nice and flat. So there we go, that has the eye circles in place. You can see the next step is that I've sewn my actual buttons on in place for the eyes. Now if you're going to be using the little sleepy eye and putting the eyelids on, of course you don't have to, you can just have them without that. you'll need to put those buttons right in the center, because that gives enough room for us to be able to put that cover over and it show enough, expose enough of that eye. If you're not using the little eyelid covers, of course you could make them side glancing, you could make them looking up or looking down, cross-eyed, quizzical, whatever you like. But I like the little sleepy eye look, given that it's a sheep and going to be on the bed, so I have got those in place. So what I've done is I've got some clear craft glue on the back of that little eyelid there. Flip that over and I'm just going to pop that one into place, and I'm going to angle it slightly to the side. This is just to hold it. It's going to make it easier for me to stitch into place with whatever method I choose. You can see I've just angled it slightly, so this is coming this way. So get that one glued on and then the second one in place, and make sure that you match it up the other side, and then we will have a look at how we're going to stitch around those eyelids. So there I have those eyelids dried, and I've gone ahead and I've stayed with the same stitch, and I've been able to get that one under the machine. You'll find that's quite easy, and just done that same little flat zigzag stitch around there. So the whole face is done on the machine if you like. Alternatively, of course, you could sew a blanket applique around those pieces there. Right, so our next step is to add our front and back head pieces together, now that that's all done. And that is as easy as matching up all of those edges very, very carefully, using your pins or your clips. And then I'm going to sew around the entire outside edge of that head. I'm going to sew that 2 times, remembering we don't need to leave an opening because we've already got that all ready and done. So I'm going to get those 2 pieces all stitched together. So once you have that head all stitched up, I've gone ahead and I've just taken the points off the ends of those ears, and I've taken my scissors in and just snipped into those under ear curves there, and then use my pinking shears around this section here, just on your obvious curves. If you haven't got pinking shears, just do those very tight curves there, so when we turn it through, we're going to have no problem. So your next step is to turn those through. I find it easiest just to take those little ears through first, bring them through and out that little opening, take the other one, pull that through, then pull the whole head through. Make sure that you push out all of your seams using a knitting needle if you've got one, and then we're going to give this whole top ear section a press. Okay, so that has the head all turned through there, all pushed out nicely, and I've pressed both those ear sections, and then I've gone ahead and I have just stitched following that side head line and lining up with that ear insert there. I've just closed off that opening, sewn through all of those layers on both sides, because we want these ears to stay nice and flat when we pad it out with our filling, and that gives us that dimension there. Just another little thought, if you wanted to from here, a cute little thing to do with this project is you could take some pearl thread in greens, variegated greens, and you could take your needle, double thread them, come in from behind into that opening and come out just at the corner of the mouth there with a knot in the end, and you could add a few strands of little green grass coming out of the corner of his little mouth. That would look very, very cute. So just another idea there. I'm sure you'll have a million of them, but that's just one to help you along. So what I'm going to do now, of course, is just fill this head. So I'm going to start by filling out that lower chin section. I'm going to pay special attention to those areas at the top corners of those ears so that it does push those ears out and that head out around it. So I'm going to continue on filling that one up until it's quite firm, and then I will show you how to sew up that back opening. So there you can see I've got that little face all nicely filled out there, and that's really quite firm. So my next step is I'm going to close that back opening. If you've got a wool felting needle, you can tuck all your fibres in. That'll keep them out the way when you're doing that. and then we can go ahead and start sewing up this opening, and we're just doing a simple overcasting stitch. So I've got my extra strong thread, I've got a nice big knot in the end, and all I'm going to do is go from side to side and close that opening. You have to remember that this is not going to be seen. This is where we attach the head to the body, so this will be largely unseen, so no need for any special ladder stitches here. It's really just making sure that we go crossing over. You can see I'm pulling those edges in as I go. Now you see why we added that extra circle, because it makes it nice and strong. And you can see I'm just going to pull that one in. So I'm going to stitch all the way across, and then I'll go all the way back again so it's nice and secure. And there we have, that little head is all finished, closed up that opening now. So if you're going to be adding something to the top of the head, you can do that now, you can do it later. I find it easier to do it now. I'm going to be adding a little series of yo-yos to the top of that head, just to give it a little bit of volume there and a bit of decoration. Now I'm doing mine in the same creamy colours, just to indicate a bit of a woolly top knot there. And you can see I've got a couple of different sizes there. You could also make it that it's just colourful flowers. A little flower garland would be really sweet too. So if you haven't made the little yo-yos before, you simply take your piece of fabric, and I've got my extra strong thread and no knots because we're just going to leave our tail ends hanging. And I've just sewn a nice small running stitch around the whole outside edge, just a little way in, till I've come back to here, take my needle off, and I'm sewing on the right side of the fabric. So then all I need to do is tie a knot, tie my first knot, pull those ends in, get my shape happening, tighten my knot, then create your little shape, your little yo-yo shape, pull everything out nice and flat and make sure it's all nicely centered. Tighten that knot. I'm making it look very difficult here and it's not. There we go. Pull those ends right in. Then you've got a nice flat little yo-yo shape, and I would just knot that off 2 or 3 times there and snip those thread ends, and that gives you your little yo-yo shape. So I've got 5 here. I've got 3 of the larger ones. I've given you a template for both sizes. I've got 3 of the larger ones and 2 of the smaller ones, and all I'm going to do is take my extra strong thread and my medium dowel needle, and I'm going to come in from behind, and I can take my stitches through each of those little yo-yos, back through and stitch them on in that way. It's just the easiest way to do it. So there you can see I've got those little yo-yos in place, and I've added my buttons as I've gone along, just where I wanted to place them. So many different things you can use here for the top of this head, or of course nothing at all. You don't have to have anything on there at all. Another one that I did think of that would be lovely are some little hand crocheted flowers. They would go really well, that lovely little woolly effect. But now that that one's all done, we can put that aside, and we're going to go ahead and we need to put together our arms and legs, and I've already got my first 3 made, and we also need to put together a little tail while we're at it. So you can see there that what I've done is I've just put my 2 right sides together of my tail piece, and I've just sewn down around that lower edge, leaving that top section open. It is a 4mm seam allowance. It's important that you keep to that, and we're just going to be able to stitch that up, and we just need to turn that one through, and just as simple as popping that one through, making sure that we get that lovely rounded finish by pushing all of those seams out, and I like to use a knitting needle to do that and push that all out. And we're only going to be adding a tiny little bit of filling to this one because we want to be able to pop that in between the seams when we're quilting, which we're going to do a little bit later. So rolling those seams out, and I will be adding that little bit of filling, and then just as I have with this one here, I'll be stitching across the top, leaving plenty of space so that when I actually do pop it in the seam, it's going to sit down rather than poke straight out. So you don't want much filling in there at all. So I'll just get that filled up and I'll stitch across the top there. So similarly with the arms and legs, we're just going to put our right sides together and make sure that you really do line everything up because they are a definite little shape, and you can use your pins or your clips to keep those in place. And it's just a matter of, we're going to leave that top section open, that 4mm seam allowance once again, going to go down and all the way around back up to the top, and we're going to sew that one 2 times. So that has my little limb all done, all stitched up, and the only other thing I do here, I don't use my pinking shears on this one, but I do snip off those little corners, and I do snip into that little access right at the apex there, and it helps it out. So turning these through, all it takes is faith and trust. And a really good pair of forceps actually. So you can see I've just manipulated that there. I like to soften it up a little. Now people have trouble with these, so I'm going to show you the way I do it. So I've softened that up area there, taken my forceps, clamped them in place, and now I'm just going to work that fabric back over itself. And it does take a little bit of wiggling, perhaps a little pixie dust would help. So pushing that one through, you can see that once it starts to go, it just comes all the way through. So push that one down on itself, and there's the end. You would pull that through. Now I'm going to show you another way to do it. So you can put your forceps inside your unturned arm, clamp the fabric in at the end, lock it in, and pull that back on itself. I don't do that usually. I usually do it this way because it protects the surface of the fabric. So I'd rather do that and have my forceps on the wrong side of the fabric, but that's entirely up to you. So then we're just going to fill that, turn that through, fill that little project, that little arm and leg, and just like I have here, and we're going to nice and firm at the end, leave plenty of room at the top for adding into that seam, and then we will just simply stitch across that top opening so that they're all ready to pop in to that little seam. There we go, that has that little front leg all completed and stitched across the top there. So now I've got my 4 limbs all ready to go. We can put those aside. Now we're going to move on to our back section. We're going to do our quilt as we go. Remember I showed you the little tail there that I've stitched together, turned through and added a little bit of filling there, and it is just a tiny little bit and it's nice and flat through here, and I've stitched that across ready. So what we're going to do is we've got our base panel underneath there and cut exactly to those measurements that I've given you, and I've chosen my layout for my strips. This, you need to decide which is the bottom end of your sheep, because how we're going to cut this top piece out is dependent on lining it up right along the base there. So what we want to do is line up that first piece exactly. I'm going to keep all of these in that order so that I don't forget. Just move them along a little just to be able to show you. So what we're going to do is lay our first piece on, and we're going to be adding our second piece right sides together, lining that one up exactly. We're going to be stitching across here. We're using that same 4mm seam allowance, and then we're going to flip that one over and press it, and then we're going to make our way with all the rest of the strips. But in between these two, we're going to add that tail. right in the center, and do make sure that you've taken your measurements either side so you've got it exactly central. Then when we lay our pattern template on the top, we will make sure that's central as well. So on this first one, we're going to sew those two together, stitch across here, make sure you're really back and forth here, and that will incorporate that little tail into that seam. So I'm going to get that done, and then I'm going to continue on adding each strip, pressing each time until my whole rectangle of fabric is covered. When you get to the end, you might find that it's a little bit short or maybe a little bit over. Don't worry about that, because the top end is not what we're concerned about. Our template won't go that far. It's this bottom end that must be nicely squared off. You can see there I've got all of my pieces stitched in place and pressed down. That little tail is incorporated there. So my next step is just to lay my base piece that I've got already prepared. And again, you want to make sure that that's completely centered so that that tail is exactly where it should be. And we're going to just line that all up. You can pin that one into place if you like, and then cut out that second piece so that we've got our top and bottom. Okay, so I've got my two pattern pieces now. I've got my top and my bottom. Now they're all pinned together. I've just opened up the front end here. So this is the front section where we're going to be adding our head. And what I've done there just quickly is I've sewn a close zigzag stitch almost all the way across on both pieces, because that's where we're going to be leaving our opening for turning and stuffing. And I want that edge to stay true and not to fray away. So that's just a little tip for there. And then on the back end, I've just opened up those pins there, and I've gone ahead and stitched into place my two rear legs, just right on that seam line there, so that they're already stable in place, so I don't have to worry about them moving. Now they're about 1 centimetre from each edge. Just stitch them in and make sure that they're curving inwards, because we're going to incorporate them into that seam that we're going to sew now. And I like to sew this body up a section at a time. It just means that you capture everything well and you can check your sewing. So what I'll do now is go ahead and clip or pin across the top here, tuck that tail in, and we're going to stitch across this top line here. I increase my seam allowance here to around about 0.5 centimetre, so sort of about 5 millimetres up to 6 millimetres, just to make sure we're capturing all of those little leg pieces in there. And I will sew straight across that edge there and sew that one 2 times for strength. You can see that seam stitch there, and then I can flip that one open. I can actually check and make sure that I've caught those legs in there well, and they're all incorporated well. And then you can see that I've gone ahead and done exactly the same thing with the front legs. These ones I've got a little closer to the edge here. Position those just a little bit closer. It's probably only around about 6 millimetres from the edge there, because I want to leave as much room here as possible, because this is going to be our opening. So now I'm going to pull that one over, and I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to clip and meet up those edges ready to sew across. But I'm only going to sew across here and across here, and I'm going to come just a little way past where that leg starts there. And do make sure that you're back and forth here and here, because that's our opening. So I'm going to get that one stitched into place also. And once you have those two front sections stitched in, you can see I've got my opening there. Just check that they are nicely secure, which they are. Then our final step is to clip or pin our side seams one at a time, and do exactly the same thing, sewing that seam 2 times as well on both sides. And then all we need to do is pull that one out through that top opening. Right, so there we go. We have little sheep body, nice fatty sheep body there, all pulled through. When you're pulling that one through, just pull the rear legs through first, and then tuck the front legs through that opening, and it'll all pull through on itself. Make sure that you press out those corners and that everything is, those seams are rolled out nicely. Now we're going to go ahead and fill. Now before I do that, I was just thinking making this one. If you wanted to make a little bed pal that was a little bit quicker and easier, a more of a cuddly sort of a project, you could make the tail and this back section, if you just cut 2 solid pieces and don't do any quilting, you could make the body out of a nice polar fleece, and that would make it quite snuggly, wouldn't it? So I would still do all of the arms and legs in your cotton print, but it will give it a very nice woolly kind of a body. Anyway, that's just a thought. I have them from time to time. Okay, so we're going to just start filling now. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be alternating with my polyester filling, tucking that right in there, making sure I'm getting into every corner. Now with these guys, I like to make them quite smushy, and I like them to settle nicely on the bed. So I add my polyester filling, my rice, and I alternate all the way. Keep shaking it all down until I get a nice soft body that holds itself well, but also sits nicely on the bed. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to do that right up until the end here, and then I'm going to show you how to close that opening. So once you've got your body all filled like I have here, so you can see that there's a fair bit of give in there, but I've got a fair bit of rice in there too, so there's a bit of weight to it. Now we're going to sew up that front opening, which we're going to be doing with a ladder stitch. I'll try and get as close as I can for you to see that. Now you can check out my video how to sew a ladder stitch. I'll put the link up the top for you, and that does show you up close. But what we're doing it with is I'm sewing it with an extra strong thread, and I've got a nice big knot in the end. You can see if I pull those 2 edges together there, that comes together nicely. So I'm just going to come in from the inside right where that seam starts to open there, and I'm going to bring that knot right through, and then I'm going to cross over to the other side within my seam allowance. A bit tricky to show you. Dive my needle in and just travel down just 1 stitch length. Take that one through, and pull that one in. So then I'm going to cross back over, and I'm going to go back into that first hole that I came into and travel 1 stitch down. Pull that one in. As I pull it in, it's knitting those 2 edges together. So then I go back across, back again into that exit hole. So the stitch is linked all the way, and travel down. Keep your stitches nice and even from side to side so that you're not travelling down further on one side than the other, so that everything knits together neatly and you're not helping little sheep with your little leg there. Pull that one up, and as you go, make sure that you're tugging on those stitches so that it's knitting those edges together. And it's simply a matter of going back and forth all the way down until you've closed that opening. But do make sure that as you go, that you're tugging on that and squeezing that seam in together as you go, because if you wait till you're this far down and try and pull up all those stitches, they won't knit together really nice and tight, and we want this to be quite invisible. In saying that, if you're new to ladder stitching, this one is placed right there at the front where that head is going to be attached, so if it's not super neat and tidy, it's nicely covered by the head. So practice makes perfect with this one. Check that video out and that will give you a good look at how to do that one. So I'm just going to close up that opening. So the final step in creating our sheep is to add the head to the body. Now what you need to do is have a little test try and have a good look at where your head will sit. Now I generally find that it sits just at the higher side of your second panel at the front there. That's just a good indication. Right in the center I make a mark, flip that body over and I've got a mark in the center a little further back because I want some pull in there. So a little further back there, that's where our button will sit, and that's exactly where we're going to start. Now it's easy enough to reposition your head if it's not in the right position. So what I use is my extra long doll needle. I've got 2 strands of extra strong thread pass through that needle, so I've actually got 4 strands I'm working with, and I've got my mark here at on the bottom of the body. So I'm going to pass through that button first of all, and then I'm going to dive straight in to that body. I'm going to try and keep a hold of that end because I don't want to lose my button off the end. Flip it over and I'm going to come out one side of that mark. There we go. I'm still going to try and hold on to that button. And then I'm going to take a large stitch across, and I've already worked out that I take my stitch across just above where we fixed that opening, and it's quite a decent bite out of that head that I'm going to take, and I'm keeping it all nice and central there. Travel across, and then I'm going to dive back in just the other side of that mark, and I want to come out on the underneath, flip it all over, come out on the underneath the other side of that button. And through that hole. Pull all those threads up. And this is where you're going to turn it over, get that little head in position, and you want to make sure that those threads aren't twisted. So everything needs to pull through and down, and really pull that head nice and snug into position. Check it, check that you've got some good movement there. You want to flip that one over, really pull that in and knot that one off at least 4 or 5 times, and then you can snip those thread ends. And if it's not in the right position, it's easy just to snip those threads and reposition it again. And so there we go, our little sheep, all done. Lovely little tail there. Beautiful little pet sitter. I wonder how they look all together. Let's grab everybody in this series and see how they look all together. Look at that, wow, the whole crew. I love seeing them all together. Do you know, I would love to know how many of you have actually made every single one of them. I definitely hope you add a sheep to your collection there. And how about you talk to me in the comments and tell me what other animals you would like to see in this series, and I'll see what I can do. I've got a couple more in mind. I'm thinking of a raccoon and obviously a fox. But if you've got any other good ideas, let me know, and I would love to help you out there. So I hope you've enjoyed this one. I can't wait to see what you do with this sheep. Little sheep is nodding off there. But it's been a whole lot of fun, and they do look so fabulous all together. So I hope you've enjoyed making my little bed-sitter sheep. Well, thank you for joining me today. Hope you've enjoyed seeing this little one come together. If you have enjoyed this video, you could give me a thumbs up. That would be absolutely beaut. I've got some exciting things coming up. I promised you all some wearable art, and I will get to that for sure. We'll be doing some lovely little mixed media brooches and some little neck collars, that sort of thing. Great for gifts. And also I have a little mouse pattern coming up, and it's probably time that we did a few more pin cushions together. So quite a lineup there coming up. I'm enjoying seeing everything that you're making. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing some coloured sheep. So you can share your creations on a Facebook page called Share Your List, Pay Creations and Pay It Forward. And that's a great way to put up your beautiful projects and everybody can enjoy them. I love to jump on there and see what you're all up to. Also, you can send them to me via Pinterest. Just follow me, Lisa Pay, on Pinterest, and I can pin your beautiful work on our Pinterest board called You Made It. Come and check that out. It's a great little positive community board. Otherwise, you can follow me on Instagram and you can chat to me there. Anything you want to chat to me about, go right ahead. I love to hear from you all. So I'm happy to hear that everybody is staying safe. I can see that you're all being very creative. Make sure that when you have all of those good things come to you in your day, make sure that you share them and pay them forward. And until next time, it's Huru from me.